Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Dekker Team. I'm Ken Dekker, and today I've got the privilege of having Dave Van Opten with me.
Hey Ken, how are you?
Dave, you're no stranger to the microphone.
No, no stranger to the microphone. They keep telling me I have a great radio face. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
They're probably accurate.
Yeah, they are.
So the question being, what are we talking about today? I think we brought you in because a lot of people are thinking about, well, should I buy a cottage? Because this is kind of that time of year where people are getting antsy. They've been inside all winter. They go, ooh, I'd like to own a cottage.
Yeah.
Or they want to buy an investment property or something like that. So we're going to talk about some ways of leveraging. Mm-hmm. And we got to be careful when we leverage. So we're going to talk about that as well.
And that's absolutely true, right? People get like, okay, maybe I can buy another property, or they've been looking at this kind of cottage that's been winter squared away for the winter, and they can't get in to see it, and now they're like, let's go.
And they might have even squirreled away some money.
Hopefully they have, right?
Yeah.
So, because when you do a second home or a cottage from the financing side of things, we want to be prepared, right? Like there's a good level of preparedness. This is different from, say, a rental property, where there might be some income coming in to offset some of the expenses or something like that. Okay. Usually a second home is one where you're just carrying all the costs.
Okay. Now, some people will buy a cottage and rent it out some weeks, because not everybody has the advantage of having 8 or 10 weeks off in the summer, right?
Yeah.
Maybe some of the teachers that are listening might, but most of us don't.
Yeah, sure.
So if you own a cottage, you may be going there on the weekend or a couple of weeks during the summer. And so there's typically some time that you could rent that out if you wanted to.
Sure. So that's great offsetting, right? So that's, maybe one of the things to consider. Or you buy it with multiple families, right? Or multiple people, whether it's, family or directly related. So you can share some of that cost over 2 or 3 families. Because again, you might not be going there every weekend, or you might be, but now you can go with other families that you like. So you can share the costs. And that's
so like a fractional ownership kind of thing.
Something like that, right?
Very cool. Yeah, we've and fractional ownership maybe has gotten a little bum rap because of the timeshares and all that kind of stuff. But there actually is some fractional ownership where people, 6 people will go together and divide it up, and it's not too expensive. And then they buy something and they divide up the weeks, and they rotate which weeks people get and share the maintenance and stuff like that. But generally, you either need someone that's in control, that's appointed to be in charge of that property,
right?
Or you're going to need really close friends.
Lots of good communication, right?
Yes, yes.
So let's talk about that. Let's back up a little bit and talk about some of the preparation that might need to happen when buying a second home. So, as we know, financial fitness, we want to make sure our own personal finances are in a place where we can say, I'm ready for a second property, whether it's shared and the expenses are shared, or whether you're bearing the entire cost of that. We need to be prepared in that.
Right.
So on the cash flow, and you referenced that in your book, I would say there's really the 3 things. We want to have all of our debt paid off, or most of our debt, consumer debt
gone. Yep.
For sure gone, right?
Yep.
And then we want to have a fair size emergency cushion, and more than just the regular family one. I would say you'd want another month or 2 on top of what you've already have.
Yeah, because suddenly now you've got 2 roofs.
Exactly.
2 sets of windows, 2 furnaces, maybe. Some cottages don't have a heating source, or maybe just have a wood stove or something. But there is 2 levels of maintenance on 2 properties now.
Yeah. So, again, you start doubling the lawnmower, and I got to pump the septic tank, because, again, most cottages are on some sort of septic system. So that would be an annual or maybe biannual costs. Again, they're usually pretty small when we're talking cottages, depending on your cottage. So there's these costs that just happen every year there.
Okay. Yeah.
So up the emergency cushion, right, in terms of just cash flow preparedness, is we want to make sure that we're good. If something happens unexpected, tree falls on the cottage, we're good. Everything's fine with that.
Right. Now, sometimes with, because you're going to have that extra insurance too, right? You're going to be paying two levels of insurance.
Yeah.
Sometimes with cottages, it's kind of neat because we can negotiate, and a lot of times they include appliances, furniture, usually maybe even the lawnmower. It might include a boat,
Yeah, yeah.
a different style of boat or whatever. Because a lot of times if people are selling their cottage, they're not necessarily going to another cottage,
Right.
so they don't need all that stuff.
Right.
Which is kind of handy because if you buy a vacant cottage, now you need double the beds. You need double, you need. So what usually happens is people go, "Oh, my mattress is 10 years old. It's time for a new one." That one goes to the cottage, and they buy a new one for their everyday.
So don't we include that in the cost of buying? Shouldn't we just say, okay, if you're going to buy the cottage, add another 15 grand to update your bed?
Wow, that's an expensive bed
Yeah,
at 15,000. Yeah, maybe all the furniture.
But we are talking about preparedness, right? In a
Yes.
sense of going in and saying, hey, that's an added cost that can really add up quickly. If if there's a boat that of course you want something to hit the water with at a cottage, and so you can add up those costs. And again, when you're thinking, I want to buy a cottage, you don't necessarily factor that into that whole cash flow piece.
Right. There's some extra things there. And to that, some of my clients have been lately saying, you know what, instead of buying a cottage, what I'm going to do is take that extra 150, 300,000, whatever I was going to put in a cottage, I'm going to add that to the value of my house, and I'll buy something on the water here around Ottawa that I can commute to, in Manotick or wherever that's on the Rideau system or on the Ottawa River. And then they get both. Right, so yes, it's you're upgrading a lot in the price of your property, but your cottage is right there. You don't have to drive to go to it. You're only maintaining one property, and so
We
that's
have that.
got some. You've got that.
We have that. If you've been in our house, we live in a log home, and constantly, we're going. Let's go to Lake Placid for a weekend, and what do they advertise? But log homes, beautiful place. I'm like, why do I want to go there? That's what I have at home. I sit there and look out the backyard, and I see our pond. Now we're not on the water, so I wish we could move our house to the water, and that would be it. But yeah, our house all the time
feels
has
like
that cottage feel.
Yeah, it feels like you're at a retreat area.
Yeah.
Because not all cottages are on the water.
No.
Although that's one piece that a lot of people are looking for. There's something about water that has that tranquility, that peacefulness, it makes you relax when you look out over it. Maybe it's the loons, the loons calling in the evening or whatever it is. It's just, there's something magical about it. It really
absolutely.
is. Yeah. And what's even more magical is when you can just go to someone else's cottage.
Well, there is that way to prepare as well, but we won't go. We're talking about buying your own cottage today. So, but certainly, and again, when we think about it from the financial standpoint, the last thing you want to do is go to the cottage and be stressed out financially because of the cottage. So that's really what we're talking about today is let's make sure we're prepared both when we go into it from a cash flow perspective. One of the other big things with the cottage is how do we get the down payment? How do we figure that out? Again, that's preparedness. Do we have the money in savings? Are we leveraging something in terms of out of our own house and reworking that?
Right.
I have a lot of clients who will say when they're renewing their mortgage, just a regular renewal, we're thinking about a cottage in the next couple of years. Well, that's a great time to actually restructure your current mortgage so that if you do it, great, there's the flexibility, and if you don't, and so there's some things that we could do that way just to get
So you'd increase
prepared.
the charge and maybe keep an empty line of credit or something that could be the down payment for a cottage if the right property came up at the right time, at the right moment, at the right price.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So that whole preparedness thing could actually be 2 or 3 years, and actually probably will be 2 or 3 years worth of preparing to get to that place with a cottage.
And the cottage isn't for everybody. Like I say, if you're not going to be able to use it much or you're not going to rent it when you're not using it, it may just become a little sore spot.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, although cottages are expensive to rent and you have to prepare usually a year in advance, because if you find a nice cottage in a nice area, usually the demand is very high for it, so you got to book it the year before.
Right.
But if you can plan ahead and maybe you spend a couple $1,000s to be at a cottage for a week or two, and yet that's still relatively inexpensive as to owning your own.
Absolutely. Right.
Now, there's something about owning your own and having, especially when you start having older kids and grandkids, and it becomes a meeting place, and it's a place to create memories and that kind of stuff. And it's a place to get away from the everyday stresses.
Yep. Yeah.
And so it's got those advantages as well. So we just, like you said, we want to be prepared, make sure we have the right amount of down payment, that we budgeted for all these expenses, and that these expenses now are not going to interrupt our giving.
Right. Absolutely. Right.
Because we don't want our so-called selfishness of owning something like that to interfere with the giving side of things. And also, cottages are a great place to invite people up to build relationship with them.
Yeah.
And, I know some people that loan theirs to pastors and different things because they just want to utilize the resources that they've been blessed with to help other people.
Yes, and so that's really key because, again, when we go to, okay, are we going to leverage? And I mean, that's why I like the long runway with a cottage, because I really like to have that thought process in place, right? Where we say, okay, how long is it going to take? What is it that we need to do? How are we going to prepare? How is this going to affect our cash flow? Like, what does that look like? Just our regular daily cash flow. And then as we do that, we can say, oh, okay, I'm ready, I'm prepared. Or, you know what? I don't think a cottage is for me. Or maybe we go fractional. Maybe we share the cottage, as we started to say at the beginning. So.
And I think a lot of people start thinking cottage when the kids are a little older. Sometimes their house is paid off.
Right.
And they go, okay, well, we paid this one off. Let's go. We're okay. We're used to making a payment. Let's go buy a cottage. And cottages can build some equity. They do go up in value over time. And so you may be able to, because they're not.
So as a grandpa.
Yeah, as a grandpa, yeah.
Maybe grandpa is buying the cottage, and that becomes the family cottage. And that I see that quite a bit, actually, in the sense of, as we talk about that, is hey, there's a family cottage. Grandpa bought it 10 or 20 years ago, and we've all been investing kind of over the generations. And this, this summer we're putting up this.
And when something needs work, we all go up and we do it. And it's that family bonding. It's like the barn raising, in the old days. And, that's one of the reasons I have a piece of property that, I haven't built. It's probably going to be a lake house as opposed to a cottage. And my thought was to fractionalize it.
Sure.
Get 10 people that are interested, and for the price of a cottage, you would have a mansion.
Right.
And that would be somewhere that you can bring, like I have. If I bring my extended family, it's my kids and their spouses, and then all the grandkids. So suddenly we've got 16, 17 people there, and it would be big enough to handle that.
Sure.
So, and there's probably quite a number of families that would like something like that you get 3-4 weeks a year.
Right. So we're talking to the grandma and grandpas here, if you need to get prepared, then, and again, because we know that even at that older generation, the income changes. There are things that, hey, you need to be prepared as well to go, hey, does this make sense? It's a great idea for our family. We can see the benefit it's going to have for generations. And I love what the Bible says about that. A wise man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And love that generational thinking, especially when we're talking about this. We're not expecting the cottage, or maybe we shouldn't expect the cottage to increase in value and, do all that. But it can have a generational effect in your family, and that's fun.
Yeah, and I think it increases in value, not monetarily, but increases in value for the family.
Absolutely.
The longer you own a cottage, the more memories are there.
Yeah.
And also, as population grows and density increases in cities, the ability to get out to somewhere where it's more spacious and more in nature becomes more and more valuable.
Yeah.
And what I found is that God's not making any more property.
No.
Yeah,
The earth isn't getting bigger?
No, not that I'm aware of. Anyways, I've heard it's warming up, but I haven't heard it's expanding.
In fact, I think the warm-up thing means it's taking more land.
More water, less land, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So just be careful what kind of waterfront you get, because it may be underwater front.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you're just joining us, you're listening to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Dekker Team, and I have Dave Van Nopten as a guest with us. Dave's with More Than Enough, and More Than Enough does financial planning, does mortgages, does coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
and
right?
taxes.
Oh, and taxes now too.
We've just launched the taxes.
Because when you earn money, you got to pay the government.
Yeah. So
Give
it's really
Caesar
about financial
what Caesar's
fitness,
due, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you help out with that, and don't give them too much. So it said give them what it's due, not.
That's right. So I'm now I got the tagline. Have you paid more than enough taxes? Come see us, right? I mean, that's what we want you to do, because you got to pay some, but
yes,
for sure, we don't want to
cool.
pay more. So.
Very cool. All right, so you offer all kinds of things. How would they reach you if they wanted to discuss a mortgage for a cottage or a second property or investment property?
So there's 3 ways, as is typical, right? You can give us a call, 613-520-4157. You can go to the website at morethanenough.ca, and that's all the contact details are there. You can check out what we do. And then, of course, there's the email. Easiest one is info@morethanenough.ca, and you can reach us there. So those are the 3 ways. Of course, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're doing all the social media stuff. So if you can't find us, there's something wrong with your Google.
Something wrong with your internet connection.
Exactly. So,
all right. So let's talk about pros and cons of leveraging, whether it's for a cottage or an investment property. Mm-hmm. Now, when I say leveraging, we're talking taking some equity out of what we built up in our primary residence and utilizing that to buy a second property.
Right.
Now, what we talked about, cottages typically are a financial drain. They cost money unless you're very good at renting them out. Mm-hmm. Now, investment properties shouldn't cost you money.
That's the thought. That's why we call them investment properties.
Typically, they're going to cash flow. They may even be positive cash flow per month. They are going to be revenue stream and building equity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as far as leveraging for that, I think that's, let's hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I mean, and we were just talking about being prepared, and I think really kind of as a caveat to start with, investment properties, you have to be prepared. You have to do your due diligence, make sure that your own family needs and all that are taken care of, that you've got some cushion, and we're just going to set that as the baseline. Say, hey, there is a level of preparedness that you need to have, right? If you are increasing the equity in your home, you have to make sure that you are prepared to carry that without any of the investment income, just in case something happens to that income. So, I'm conservative that way. I'd like to see that you can carry your own house property and your own stuff all on them without the investment money coming back in as we have to have this investment money coming in or we won't be able to have groceries next week.
Right.
That's important. But as you do that, once we get to that level, so we're established, we've got an emergency cushion, a way to go, then we say, what can we do in terms of leveraging and how much do we buy? Mm-hmm. Well, we do need on an investment property 20% down as the down payment.
Right.
And that's usually a pretty big hurdle for those people. And that's also a good level of preparedness where we say, if you can't really come up with 20% down, then you just need to wait and save some more. And now isn't the time.
Yeah, invest in something else with your smaller amounts, and small beginnings will build up. Yeah. Okay, so what about the case where someone wants to buy a second residence? It's actually for their kids maybe. They're going to university. They want their kids to be in it. So still 20% down for a second residence?
That's a second home, right? Yeah. So even though it's kind of an investment property where your kids live there, quite possibly they'll rent rooms out to their friends and there may be a source of income coming in. Great strategy. But it is a second home because your family members living there. So whether it's your parents or whether it's your children, So long as the immediate family is living there, then
Okay.
you can call that a second home. And then the down payment, the minimum down payment is 5%.
Okay.
But you are going to pay the insurance costs,
premium
right?
for
So
the
the
insurance,
premium for the insurance is there. So again, you have to factor that in. Am I okay with that premium happening?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually did a calculation the other night at a home buyer workshop, and I ran two scenarios. Basically, $300,000 townhouse, and the first person putting 5% down, $15,000, because that's all they had.
Yep.
And I added in the CMHC premium, which was like $9,750 or something like that. And then we worked it down 3 years later, how much mortgage was left and what's the value of the house. Then I took the next person who was renting the same townhouse
Right.
and waiting till they accumulated 20%, which we figured 3 years was fair, 15,000 per year
Okay.
in savings, so an extra 3 years. And we raised the value of the property by 4%, which is
Right.
Ottawa's average is around 4.8 for the last 20 years. So
Okay.
we did 4%. We ran the two numbers down. After 3 years, the two properties were within about $3,000 the mortgage amount,
Wow.
and the other person had put in an extra $45,000.
Wow.
And so the person that waited and saved the money was actually behind. It was about $43,000 they were behind
Yeah.
the person that paid the CMHC fee and bought now.
Right.
So that was a wild example to run through. And sometime if you want to come to one of our home buyer workshops or investment workshop, we'll
Ken
we'll
runs
go through,
the math.
We'll go through some examples, because sometimes you just go, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize spending the money on the insurance now actually made me a lot more money,
Right.
because they're still paying the same amount
Right.
for the similar property, whether you're renting or you're owning.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was cool. So yeah, so let's go back to leveraging, because
Yes.
I just threw a little tangent in there.
but good in a sense of saying, hey, there is a difference between an investment property and leveraging for the investment property and leveraging for that second home, and some of the nuances there that need to
Yeah,
happen.
so that's interesting. I didn't realize I could buy one for my kids going to university with 5% down, and that's going to hopefully build value over time, and they can rent out some rooms. It's going to teach them some principles about how to be a landlord, how to be responsible. And I've seen the odd one blow up where the
Yes.
kid's not responsible enough. They haven't had the training, and they're partying and whatever, and they kind of trash the place. So hopefully, if you're going to do this, you got to make sure your child is mature enough. Everybody likes to think they are, but you got to take a reality check. Is my child mature enough to live on their own and manage the property as well?
And I'm just a huge advocate that if that is the strategy, that there's an official, you're the property manager, you're on site, these are the roles, this is, like that you just go through that, because, the expectation is that they're probably going to live rent free, right? In a sense of, hey, they're there, they get free rent while they're going through school, and then, okay, but that means that it's not free rent. You have to earn it. So.
You have to earn it. And as a matter of fact, what I would do if it was my child is I would put them on title even. So they're over 18, they can be on title on the property. And as a matter of fact, the depending on whether your idea is to build equity for your child or build it for you, depends on how much you go on title, because you can actually buy a property for your child but only keep 1% ownership.
Right.
They keep 99% ownership, because then as the value goes up and decide to sell it, maybe because they're no longer at the university or whatever, the capital gains would be in your 99% would be charged to the child, who's probably not making much money.
Yeah.
Just
So
getting
from
out
a
of
tax
university.
perspective, we didn't want to get into taxes today, but there certainly are some tax advantages of having your child on title. There's also some responsibility advantages in terms of, wow.
Because it's his house or her house.
Exactly. That ownership piece is really huge in terms of them taking ownership of something, as opposed to it being dad's house and I'm the property manager.
I think that's key.
Yeah,
I think that's really
really
key.
good.
Yeah, so awesome. So then like you say, leveraging your existing home, it's easy to do if you got a bunch of equity. I kind of say it's like waking up your lazy asset, because your asset's sitting there. It's growing at the rate of property, but it's not leveraged really compared to a rental property. And so sometimes you might want to pull out some. But the issue with pulling equity out of your house is that extra equity is now tax deductible, the interest on it. But typically, the property you buy between the two mortgages, because now effectively you're basically 100% mortgaged on the new property, typically the rent won't cover it.
Right.
And so you're going to be writing a check each month.
And that's so important, right?
You got to know that.
Sure, you got to know that going in, that you know, hey, what are the margins? Am I, truly and really cash flow positive, including this leveraged piece?
Yes, and usually you won't be. Yeah. And what I say to people is that's okay. Let's say you're short $200 even a month. If your mortgage payment is, say, $1,100 on a $300,000 townhouse or whatever with 20% down, then $550 or $500 or so of that mortgage payment is actually principal pay down.
Sure, yeah.
So the $200 you're putting in, it's like putting it into the bank. It's just how you look at it.
And again, just, but you have to be able to cash flow carry that, right? That $200 has to come out of your cash. So just make sure that you can do that on the way in. So for sure, And again, so, looking at that, the other thing when we're talking about leveraging is, hey, as you leverage your capacity for actual how far you can go, what that is begins to increase. There are maximums in terms of how much any one person can leverage. And so, again, planning ahead, if you're adding your child onto that new place, then, do they have an income? How does that work out in terms of just plain old qualifying? Because the qualifying, if you're financing, now you're qualifying for, hey, we've leveraged out one property, and now we've got a second property we want to buy, and that's going to steal your buying power.
Right. And that can also, affect a future property if you go on with a child to buy something like that. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks, Dave. It's been very educational. We've got a couple properties to discuss, and then we'll wrap up the show. So we've got two properties south of the city, just around the Greeley and Manotick area. The first one, $650,000. It's a beautiful home. It's kind of like you bring your business and your home together in your cottage, because it's got an in-ground pool, saltwater pool, beautiful, gorgeous home with a 2-car garage. But then also it has a 1,500 square foot shop, which is heated. Great for your home business, contractor, that kind of thing. So you're right at work. You just walk out the door and walk into your shop. It's perfect. So that one's awesome. And then also we have a beautiful property in Manotick. Actually, it's called Manotick, but it's Rideau Forest. It's in a treed area, a little over 2 acres. Just a gorgeous property. That is for sale at just over $700,000. Okay. And you're in with a lot of luxury homes. It's suited. It's probably actually in the lower end of what sells in there, so it's great. You always want the little less expensive home, right? You don't want to be the $2 million house on the street. Yeah. But if there are $2 million houses on the street, it's nice to be the one that's just over 700. Yeah. And so that's a fabulous property on Lord's Manor Lane. And so if you'd like information on those properties or any others, give us a call, 613-860-4663. And we'd love to help you out. Thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate.
What you want to do? Well, man, it's on you.